Good afternoon from Beijing. I'm Kate Kui. Today we are going to have a live panel discussion with Zhou Jingfeng and Wang Zhixuan on the topic of green development in the Chinese modernization process. Zhou Jingfeng is the Secretary General of China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation, and Wang Zhixuan is the Vice President of the Experts Committee of China Electricity Council and member of a National Committee of Experts on Climate Change. Both of them are experts in the sector and have participated in many important policy-making processes in the field globally. We look forward to hear their candid thoughts and insights today. So gentlemen, welcome to today's panel. Well, when we're speaking, we are actually enjoying a very lovely and pleasant spring in Beijing. We do have a flower blossom and green is also everywhere. But in my memory, many years ago, when I was studying as a college student in Beijing, the weather wasn't like this before. We have a lot of sandstorms, we have a lot of bad weathers here. So what has changed and what brought such kind of changes to the city? This is my first question to Mr. Zhou. And by the way, before we start, I would like to introduce two guests. They will use English and Chinese intermittently, and we do have translators for our audiences. And the translator will provide simultaneous translation in both English and also Chinese to our audiences. 所以这个周教授，您先给我们讲讲哈，就是北京的这个天气现在变得是好。
About the weather in Beijing. Now the weather is getting better in Beijing. So what efforts have been made in the past few years? So we don't see much like sandstorms, and now we are enjoying a very beautiful spring. So I would say in the past decade, we have made a lot of efforts to handle all of these pollutants, industrial pollutants, making sure that we have improved the environment significantly, especially for the water and air quality. And also we are doing a lot of work for the forest, and we are doing a lot of work for our forestation and plant a lot of trees, and we mobilize all the public to engage in this endeavor, especially for the tree planting day. All of these have played a key role. So Mr. Wang, so you are an expert in the electricity sector. So does that have some relation for people use less coal recently? Well, so when people using less coal, well, it will not have a big impact. But this will also have some relations for green development. In the past few years, as we could see, the consumption of coal still increased, but right now we are seeing less smoky days. So, for example, in 2006, for the electricity sector, at that time, we are reduced a huge amount of the sulfur dioxide. But if we look at the figure back in 2020, the figure already reduced quite amount. And last year, we only emit only around 1.5 million tons last year for the sulfur dioxide. That means that we have done a lot of work and measures to mitigate the pollutant discharge. So, as I said, for coal, it will generate some of the pollutants, but we can take a lot of measures.
In English, it's not that we are not using coal anymore, but instead we're trying to make this coal usage more green to a certain extent, and making sure there's a clean way to use this coal to kind of mitigate the pollution problem. So, Professor Zhou, let me ask you, the green development is actually one of the key concepts in the Chinese modernization, the concept that's raised in this year's MPC and CPPCC 2 sessions. How should we understand this green development in your view?
So in China, for the green development, actually, we could start talking about this issue from the Chinese modernization. So for the Chinese modernization, it may have some different features as compared to other countries. One of the distinct features is that right now people are facing huge challenges brought by the environment. So when we are promoting the green development, we have to make sure that we could reduce the pollutant. So that said, we have to promote a green modernization or a green development, just as Mr. Wang said, for the coal, in the past for the developed countries, they don't have much pressure in using coal. And for the policy side, they also not experience such a kind of deep pressure. But right now, when we are using coal, we are facing a different scenario. When we are seeing the rise of the coal, we have to make sure that we handle properly the emission of the pollutant and also reduce the carbon emission. That is quite different in the green development in the new era. And also we have to promote the sustainable development when we are pursuing the green development. And also for the modernization today, we have to be guided by the ecological civilization, which is the core for the future development. That means why we are pursuing green development. Because we have to respond to the sixth time of the distinction. We also have to respond to the climate change and also the public health. All of these are challenges for us. And for China, it is actually leading the world. I also have some words to add to this comment. In China, even though the coal consumption accounts for about 56.2% of the overall energy consumption, however, this proportion has been reduced year by year. In 2013, we have reached to a peak for the consumption of the coal. Afterwards, the figure has been reduced. By the end of last year, the consumption actually exceeded the figure that of 2013. But in general, it is quite moderate increase. However, when we look at the figure last year, there may be some changes in the international landscape. However, the proportion of the usage of coal has been reduced. This is because we are using more sustainable or renewable energy. I also want to emphasize that why China still have a big proportion of the coal consumption. This also coming back to the situation in China. For the resources in China, most of the 90% of them are actually coming from coal. And for the petroleum and the natural gas, it also takes up a small portion. Coal is the major energy and or the major consumption for Chinese people. So that's why we targeted a lot from the policy side. On one side, we have to make clean use of the coal resources. Maybe it involves a lot of technologies. And also, we have to consider the development of the renewable energy. For developed countries, when they are using the energy, at the beginning, they depend heavily on coal, and later on they will use petroleum or the natural gas to replace the coal. This is also a transition of the usage of the energy. However, in China, we are not able to use the petroleum to substitute or replace coal. Now we may want to use more renewable energy to replace coal. For example, the wind power or the PV power. This will take a longer stage. So this trajectory is quite different.
Some developed countries, basically, when they want to criticize that China is not paying enough fair share in this green development globally, they're saying that we still have a lot of coal production. We use a lot of coal as one of the excuses. So as what Professor Wang just mentioned, each country has different scenario, but as long as we have a balanced approach, we are paying our fair share. What is your take on that?
这个我们建立了一个新的概念，就是 we're born equal of carbon rights and carbon responsibility。在地球上的每个人，不管是发达国家、发展中国家，他们的碳权利今天呢应该是一致的。那么他们这里包括他们的排放权和对于已有的碳负效应的责任，就是减低碳排放和碳影响、碳捕获工程上的项目上的责任，这些应该是一样的。那么这个一样还要再深入一步，
就是我们中
Also,
国，
we
大家
need to
批评
take
我们
one
中
step
国，我好
further.
像
Some
我
people
就拿
may
山西来举例吧。
criticize
山西的碳排放
China.
很高，
So,
但
for
是山
example,
西
in
发的
Shanxi
电
province,
送给了黄
even
渤
though
海，
it has
送
a
给了其他地方，
huge
那
amount
这是
of the
它的碳
carbon
排放
emission,
吗？不是，
however, it
它是黄渤
generates
海地
a
区人的
huge
碳排放
amount。of
那么中国
electricity
的
or
碳排
power.
放，
So
中国
when we
大量的
look
汽
at
车
the
出口
carbon，
那么
emission
生产汽
in
车钢
China,
材生产全部的这碳排
for
放
example, we
应
export
该
a lot
记
of
在
automobiles,
消费这些汽车
and
上，
also
是
when we are
服
looking
装
at the carbon
电器汽
emission,
车。所以
this
如果这样去
responsibility
算，
of the emission should be
这样是一个
counted
科
on
学
those
公
consumers.
平的算法。
So
那么
this is a
如果
more
这样算之
scientific
后，
way to
我们再去
calculate
看中国与世
the
界
amount，of
再去
the
看发
carbon
达国家和发展
emission.
中国家，我
When
们
we
会发
have
现
this figure
发展中
ready
国
and
家
compare
的
our figure
碳排放
with the developed
是
countries, we
一
may
般来讲
notice
比发
that
达国家碳排
for
放
the
还是
developed
即使到
countries,
今天还是低很多。
they
那
still
么
have
我
a
们
less
在这个
carbon
基本的大
dioxide
原则下，
emission. So this is
发达
the
国家
general
为了整体
context.
的发展中国家要不要重新烧煤、
For
烧木
the
材，再增
developing
加碳排放，
countries, they may
来
consider whether we
重
have
走
to
工业发达之路呢？
reuse
不可以
the
了。
coals
发达国家用他们的
to
技术，用
boost
他
the
们
development.
的力量来
But
帮
that
助
is
发展
not the
中国
case
家在
today.
发展过程中
For the
直
developed
接
countries, they
跳
have to
过
provide some
传统的
support
工业文
to
明
the
进程，
developing
直接进入
countries.
生态文明进程，开启
And right now we
分
have
布
to
式
enter into
新
a
能
new
源、清洁
era
能源
for
和再
the
生能源的方式呢，这是为整个人
ecological
类
protection.
度过今天
So
危
we
机
need
的
to enter
正
into
确
a
的
new
道路。
phase to use
所
the
以就是中国
renewable
在这个过
energy.
程当中其实承担了很多的
So
责任
in
啊。一
this
方面是这个
process, China has
全
taken
球
up a
制造，
lot
我
of
们要付出
responsibility.
一定的
First
这
of
个
all,
碳排放
we
的代价，
need
但是
to
这个是为全球服务
emit
的。
some of the
另外一
carbon
方面，我们自己
dioxide
节能
for
减
the
排，我们自己
manufacturing.
的这个产业转型，
At the
自己的
same
整个
time,
能
we
源的
need
转型，
to
我们自
do
己要
some
付出很多的代价。
upgrade so as to mitigate the carbon
因为
emission.
温室气体特别二氧化碳，
So for the greenhouse gases, especially for the carbon dioxide, when it enter into the atmosphere, this amount will be accumulated,
甚至上百年在
meaning that the carbon dioxide emitted
那么从累
today
积来看，
may still
发达
exist
国家
several years later.
人均的排放量要比
If we look
我们
at the
要
per
高得多
capita
所
of
以
the
说
carbon
这样的气候
emission,
变化
I would say
有一个历史
the
责任的问
developed
题。
countries
那
may
么对
have
中国来说，
more carbon emission compared to the developing countries. General Secretary Xi Jinping has also emphasized that when we are coping with the climate change, it is everyone's responsibility to take on the task. This is the way for China to realize the sustainable development. If we cope properly about the climate change, and this is also the basic requirement for us to build a community of shared future for mankind. And also, this is our attitude to achieve the dual carbon goals. So when we are talking about whether China have to take on the responsibility on the carbon emission,
对，在
we
这个过
have
程当中，我
to
们发现中
take
国的
a
这个新能源
historic
行业是非
perspective
常
view.
争气啊，就是大概
So
在
for the new
几年
energy
前
development in China
其实
is
中国的工业行
thriving
业相对还是比较落后
throughout the
10
past
年前可能是
decade.
非常落后
I would say 15 years ago, it is
一下子就变成
quite
了
weak in China for the new energy development. But in the recent 2 years, I would say China has a leaping progress in the past 2 years. I remember in 2006, China has released the law on the renewable energy. So for this law will boost the development of the generation of the wind power and other kinds of the sustainable power. In 2006, we take actions to generate the wind power. And start from 2010, we will continue to take measures to boost the renewable energy. In 2010, I would say we are seeing more renewable energy in the power generation. For example, last year, the installed capacity of the renewable energy accounting for 29%, generating 13.8% of the total generation of the power. So I specifically refer to the wind power generation and the PV power generation. If we look at the figure, last year, the solar power generation also has increased compared to the previous years. The increase of the wind power and the PV power, meaning that we have less consumption of the coal power. Before 2010, I would say most of the 75 to 80% of the power are generated by coal, but last year I would say the coal-fired power generation is only accounting for around like 50%. That said, in the trajectory in generating the power, we are making a lot of contribution to boost the green development.
So let me just quickly summarize what Professor Wang just mentioned. He basically was telling us that the clean energy sector in China, all the enterprises are working very hard in terms of catching up the technology and also the installation capacity as well as the electricity generated in order to replace coal to a certain extent. Therefore, previously, the coal usage in China was almost 100% and then 75%. But now the percentage is gradually coming down to around 50%. And in the meantime, the solar PV installation capacity is dramatically increasing, and also the electricity usage out of the new energy sector is also growing very rapidly. So Professor Zhou, what do you think about the technology upgrades and also the technology improvements in this sector? Are you satisfied?
Well, I don't like to touch upon on the technology, but you ask why we are doing a good job. There may be several factors. First of all, China endeavored to build a community of shared future for mankind. We have a very good awareness because from the central government, it attached great importance to build a community of shared future for mankind. And this is also part of the constitution. And also, I would like to mention the institutional advantage. In Western countries, they will not take a fast step because we make up the policies and also we have joint efforts from different sectors of the society. So for the Western countries, they still have a lot of gaming about the development of the conventional industry and the new industry. However, in China, the situation is quite different. We give a lot of support to develop this emerging industry. And also I want to emphasize the market size. We have a huge market size. So when we are coming out with a policy, so this will also create a rippling effect in the city. And so for all of these accounting for the reasons why we have done a good job in the green development. And of course, we have done a lot of innovation in the technology, and all the policies, talents, all the strengths has coming all together and also make China what it looks like today. So at the beginning, some people are saying we have invested a lot in developing the wind power, the PV power, but now if we look back, we would say we are actually leading the future. Because in the future, the whole humanity will have to embark on the journey to develop the sustainable
so we do have systematic advantage, so to speak, and the technology development actually came after the policy guidance and also market-driven, because with market we have scale economy, and these are the prerequisites in order for technology, to drive what is happening, to drive the industry upgrade to a certain extent. It's interesting. 刚才您说到了这个政策指引。
Also, you just mentioned about the policy guidance. This is also very important to guide the future development, especially for the new development, a new industry, especially for the transition in energy. So, what happens if we don't get access to the subsidy? Well, actually, at the beginning stage, we do need the government subsidy. For example, when we start to use the PV power, the government will provide maybe 1 RMB for the generation of the power. But as we progress, and this subsidy will continue to reduce the subsidy, right now we don't receive any subsidies if we build a wind power station or the PV power station. So for the subsidy, it's actually coming from the usage of each kilowatt of the electricity. Except for the subsidy, the government will also encourage the public to use the renewable energy. That means for the consumers who are using the renewable energy, they may receive some of the support from the government, and they're able to consume these energies in the market or different parts of their work. So on one hand, they will receive the subsidy from the government, and at the same time, they have this obligation or responsibility to use the renewable energy. All of these have been written down into law. And still remember, at certain times, maybe fewer people use the renewable energy, and the State Council take the lead and organize a number of meetings. And also they encourage different sectors to use the renewable energy. And also we are working with the power grid company to promote the wind power and the PV power. And actually sometimes there may be some litigation about the conflict of using the renewable energy. And this is actually defined by the country that we have to prioritize the use of the renewable energy in the power grid network. But also we have to understand the unbalanced need. Well, it is quite a complicated situation, but if the state-owned enterprises, they are not doing a good job, the public can still have the right to sue those state-owned enterprises. So that's why we review a lot of our efforts and also trying our best to promote the use of the renewable energy. And also coming back to your question, I would say subsidy is quite vital in promoting the usage of the renewable energy. We need those subsidies to develop a brand new sector.
The government subsidy is a must in order to promote the energy transition in China at the very beginning. But gradually, when efficiency enhances, the government subsidy will gradually fade as a natural result. But at the very beginning, it is a must. Without that, the market cannot grow as fast as expected. 这里就有一个很重要的问题，就是
And this comes to another important question.
就是用英文叫 play such an important role， 就扮演这么重要一个角
So
色
if
的话，
government plays such an important role,
这个整个绿色的发展是中国现代化的这个
so
中国
the
式现代化
green
的
development
当中的非常重要的这个
is a very important link for Chinese modernization.
全球的性，
But also the
光
green
通过一家人
development
做是不够的。那如果
is
其他
actually
国
a
家的政府
global
半途
initiative.
而废了怎么办？
So we need other countries to take part in this endeavor. So what happens if other countries are not playing their role? So for the green development today is actually for the whole humanity to face the three major crises in the new era. That said, for some of the countries or regions, if they are not doing their work, for example, the industrial civilization is still taking the lead in other parts of the country. For some countries or regions, maybe they make some contribution, but at a certain time, they step back
反复的教育人类。
However, I believe that the nature
发展的道路之中和绿色发展
will force
自然
the
的
whole
成绩
population or the whole humanity to go back to the path of green development.
人民的参与，整个人类
And also for the participation of the general public
会推动这些各国政府和各个
will
方面
have an
包括大
influence
企业
for the
它改变
government
很多
in
企业
different
很多
countries,
公
and
共
also
企业
it will have
都
an
在
impact
城市的研究
for
包括
leading
ESG 在
enterprises.
这样一个背景下诞生的，
For
都
that's
是在
how
怎
ESG
么能够改变
emerge
同时
under
这
such
也是
context.
人类的未来
And
你
this
早
is
改变
also the
你早
future
适应
for
你早
the human
能够
beings.
继续发展
If we
你晚
make
改变
changes and then we can adapt
总有一
to
天
the
突
nature.
然你就没有了生存的空间。
对，但您刚才
Otherwise,
提
you
到
may lose the
对，您刚
space
才
to
提到您
live.
说，假设比如说，个别人头脑发热，
So
他
just
半
talk
途而
about
废
for
现在不是
some
个别人
countries, they are
美国
like
是
step
个
back.
全球最大的
In
经
the
济体
past, like US
它半
used
途
to
而
be the
废
major
欧洲也
economy
在
and
一
they
定
step
程度
back.
上走过回
And
头
for some
那
of the
假设如
European
果全世
countries,
界
they
最大
may
的
not
这些经济
engage
体都可以
in
这
the
样
green
实
development the
实地
same
做
level
法
as
这
other
个事情应该
countries.
怎么进行？像您说的，
So what
假设如果
happens
要靠
if
自然来
more
惩罚的话，
like
这个
a
代价可能
majority
更
of
大
the countries step
您怎么
back
看？
from the green
我认
development?
为这现在就是要站
What's your
在
take?
构建人类命运共同体
So
的
first, we have to emphasize the
全球治理
importance
体系
to
方面
build a community of shared
进一步
future for
要
mankind. We
处
have
理
to pay
对
attention
应
to
的
the
气候变化的
global
责任。
governance.
这个问
For
题
example,
必
we
须要
have
通
to
过
divide the
国际社会的共同
responsibilities
努
to
力
different
当然有的
nations
国家
on
哎
climate
他可能
change.
在开始讨论的时候参与，
So for
但是
some
最后真正
countries,
的要到
maybe
互
at the
相
beginning they
签
take
署
part
这个
in the
协
discussion,
议
but
或者
when
到
it
互相
comes
责任
to
时候，他
a
可能就配合
contract signing
出
or
现
a
这种情况。
protocol
实际上
signing
达成
and
多次
these countries
从京都议定
retreated.
书到巴黎协
Well,
定
actually, that is
他们
not
都
the first
拉出
time
去
we
反复
see
反复了好几次。
this
所以这
situation
种
occurred.
我认为也应该得到全人类的
For example, from the Kyoto
有什么
Agreement
办
and the
法
Paris
比较好的
Agreement,
约
I
束
think
呢？
the whole
呃
humanity
约
should
束可能
oppose
是
all of these actions.
通过
Shall we
当然
take
像
some,
你
like,
说
for
的
example, some
不要
restrictions
但我
to
还想说一句
make sure that this situation will not happen again?
最近我看到了欧洲的一个垃圾箱，
So recently, I saw a garbage bin in a European country. Actually, that is a quite impressive story.
是用41%的
For example, for that the garbage bin, it said that this garbage bin is made from 40% of the
用过之后有
recyclable
可以
material.
再利用。
But if you use this garbage bin and then 97% of this garbage bin
我们都经历过很多东西
can be made again,
坏了
and also
不完
for
整
this
把手提
garbage
下
bin, it could be used for
那么
up to
这
10 years.
我想说的，这是一个欧洲企业的产品。
This is a product from a European country.
每个企业
For
这种
each
更
individual
底
and
层的
each
全面的
enterprises, they have to fully participate. And we always talk about HBS, that is the human-based solution. I would say
他们用采购
more
用
people
习惯
participate
用
in
生
this
活用投票
process and more
来推
people
动
embracing the idea of green development, this will lead to a change. Even though we have these, for example, the UN conventions and different agreements, of course they are quite important, but I think the most important thing is the public participation and engagement. And we need to come up with a new thought on the ecological civilization. The whole population should change.
是必然的。
Right. 所以这个约束 the such restriction is actually based on common understanding of the goal that green development is a must for all human beings, but not for certain country or certain group of people only. 所以这个 common understanding 可能是一个 ground。您刚才提到的这个个人
Also, you
提到的
mentioned
企业
individuals, you
我其实特别
mentioned the
想分享我的
companies.
这个见解，就是说
I also
假设我
have
们有这个
another
绿色发展
question.
绿色发展作为前提，
So green
我
development
们
is
的
the
企
premise.
业转型会是什么样？
So what it
然后
looks
呢
like
大
for
概
the
就是这个绿
enterprise
色发展会
transition.
怎么样去推动我们
What
自己的企业生存？
Whether the green development
对
will
于中国
help
来说，它绿色发展，它已经不
enterprise
仅仅是个理
upgrade.
念，它也不仅
in
仅是
China,
现在
green
这个
development is not
它已
just a
经是
word.
通过了一系列的法律法规
Because we have
一些
passed
制
a
度
lot of laws
它已经有具体
to
要求。
support the
作
green
为作为
development.
企业来说，它首先
For
是需
enterprises,
要依法 来进行生产和经营。
They need
那么在
to
这个依法里面，实际上就
do
包
their
括
work in accordance with the
控
law.
制包括其他的，我们现在要有
For example, they have to manage the
有可再
pollutants,
生能源法，就是
and
按照
also
法
we
律
have the law on
污
circular
染
economy,
防治法，这是更多了。
and also we have
第
the
二个
law
呢，
to fight against
整个
pollution.
从国际社会的这个发展的趋势，绿色发展
From the
的趋势
international
实际
landscape,
上已经深入到全球，包括全国。
some
那么
of
作为
the
一个企
industrial
业，
transformation has
你不是
already
在绿色发
coming
展
down
的这个路
to
上去走，
different
就刚才讲到的
sectors
ESG
of the daily
那
life.
么对于
So we
企业
just talk
它的
about
社
the
会形
ESG.
象社会责任
For the
影响的形象
enterprises,
会有影响
they also
就这个
need to
企业
show their
它也不会
responsibilities.
是一个大家喜欢的认可的
So
企业
if they're not
这也就是
fulfilled
说
their
在一
duties,
定程度上有道义的
and
这个约束。那么
we
第
need
三
to
个
give them some
事实
ethical
绿色
restriction.
发展也是
And also
企
for
业
the green
经济
development,
增长点或者利润增长点，
it will
它
bring
长远发展的一个目标。
long-term
如果没有绿
benefits
色发
or
展，
profits
它的
to
产
the
品
enterprises.
它的服务
Without green
它也
development,
逐步的它也就会
This
萎缩
company
就从这三个方面
will not
既有
thrive in the
约束
future.
又有社会
So
责
on
任
one
的
hand,
要求
we
还
need
有
to
企
give
业
them some restriction, and also we will give them some
对，你这个很有意
responsibility
思，很多
for
人觉
the
得绿色发
enterprises.
展它其实是一个投入，
Some
是一
people
个
are
负担
talking about
但是呢，
it
就是你
feels
谈到了
like
它会有
green
利润
development is
能
look
不能
like
给
a
我们展开
burden.
讲讲这个利
And you
润？
just mentioned about the
这个利
benefits
润
or
实际
profits
上
brought by the green
从科技创
development.
新
Can you
在这方
elaborate
面
on
如果
that?
没有科技创
When we
新，
talk about the
那可
green
能就会
development,
把
this
绿色
actually
发
refer
展把它当成
to the scientific.
但是即便是负担
innovation
你为什么一定要做呢？因为我有法律
Some people
法规
may
的这个
think
要求
that the green development may be a burden for the
我们
enterprises,
污染物的
but
排放
because of
为什么
the
能下降得这么快
legal
就是因
restriction,
为它有清晰
these
的
enterprises
约
have
束
to abide by the
如果
law.
说你达不到要求，那你就是违法。
For
就
the
不能履行
enterprises, they are
但是
not
你又
able
要
to
又要
op
达到
if
要
they're
求
operating
而且你还要
without the
所以
restriction
就
given
必须
by
要
the
做
law.
创新
They need
他们这
to
个之
come
间
up
有
with
这样一个
the technological innovation in order to fulfill the objective and the goal.
风险防范。一个企业
And
呢
also we need to
它
talk
这个
about
要
the risk management.
没有了减少了风险，就是增加了利润。
For
比
the
如说这个
enterprises, if they
有好多
reduce the risk, meaning that
比如
they
说
already
这个
receive some of the
一大项目
benefits and the profits.
那么它涉及到环境问题，它可能前期的大量的投入都废了。
For
已经
example,
经历过
If some of the
在
enterprises they are not paying attention to the
就是我们
environmental
已经
protection,
停止了它的
some of
是环境问题
their projects
那
or
么
programs need to be
所以
suspended.
它可以大规模的避免你的这种损失。另外呢，也
So
可以
if
大规
they
模
are
地提高
being more
前
linked
瞻
to
性
the green development,
你
and
比如说
then
风电、光电，
all
那
of
么你
these
如果早做了
programs
这样
will
的事
continue
那
to
么今天
sustain.
呢你的市场
For
占有
example,
技术
for
你
some
天
of the
然
enterprises, they're
这
if they're
这些都是你的利润。
paying more attention to the wind power generation and the PV power generation,
因为
they're actually already leading
现在
the industry.
生产汽车我进口要进钢材。
For example, if we want to produce the automobile, we need to get some steel. In the past, we have to
你钢
pay
材，如
attention
果
to
你
the
的企业
price,
绿色，
etc. But right now,
含
we
碳量
need
低
to understand the carbon composition of the steel.
这个现在又有
So
钢壁
that
了
means
你欧洲已经基本
if
上
we are
逐渐
using the green materials, and this will generate more profits and benefits for the enterprises. So for some of the
就
materials,
阻止了你这些都是
if they contain a huge amount of carbon, and they have to pay extra cost.
对，你们刚才提到了这个，就是利润也好啊，
So you just talk
就是提到
about the
利润也
benefits,
好
the
提到
profit, and also
最后其
the
实是利润
investment.
会转
And
换成
actually,
利
the
润
investment
最
at
关键
the
的可能这个
initial
赛道开
stage
始
will
还得
turn
先要
into
投入
profits
我看
in
到
the
过
end.
UNDP 的报告，其实
I
就是要
used
真正
to
让人类
read the
实现
UNDP
需要花大力
report,
气的
and
可能
it
这个
said
是
in
外
order to realize the green
这些钱到底
transition,
会从哪里来
actually
呢？这些钱
it
会不会是
consumes a
基于
great
我们
amount
人
of
类向绿色
capital.
转型的一
So
个
how we
非常
get
大
this
的
amount of
阻碍
money?
I was asking these two professors, according to a UNDP report, in order to facilitate this green transformation of our human society, a huge amount of money needs to be thrown into the system in order to facilitate such kind of transformation. The dollar amount could be trillions. I'm asking them where the money will be coming from in their view, and is capital going to be a big hurdle in the road to green development?
我参加了一个国际会议
I used to
Face
attend
Investment，就是
an international meeting, the freeze investment.
相关的这个大量的资金在全球。
So, for example, for the religion-related investment,
选的重大方向讨论的时候呢，他们提出来，我们停止向所有化石。
They mentioned that for the fossil-related or the coal-related projects, they will not use the investment in these sectors.
他们觉得应该去投绿色转型。
They are saying they should invest this amount of capital into the green transformation and green development. And also for the banking sector, they also are working on the ESG and the UNPRI. So while they're talking about the ESG, some people are saying this is an upgraded version for CSR because they are considering the safety and security of their investment. This is a safety issue about the investment. So for China, we always consider that it is quite important to build a community of a shared future for mankind. So for China, for the green loans and the green investment, we could see significant increase. So I would like to answer your question, how do we get the money? This is a small scale of the investment. And also we invest a lot in the market, the technology, and also we invest in the talent. So all of these are investments to boost the green development. For some of the money are coming from the government and some of them are coming from the private enterprises. Do we have sufficient capital? I think you raise a very good question. This is talking about the cost of the energy transformation. Because this will relate the systemic cost of the energy transformation. For example, we paying a lot of attention to the dual carbon goals, the carbon emission peaking, and the carbon neutrality. So where we get the money, the core, the essence is that so whether the economic and the economic society are able to handle this amount of capital. So that's why China has pledged to deliver the dual carbon goals. And also, we have to make sure that we need to have a safe, renewable energy transition. For example, we just talked about the fossil energy. So are we able to eliminate the coal? Are we able to use all the renewable energy to replace the coal, etc.? So right now in China, the coal-fired power plant has an average usage rate about like 12 to 13 years. So for these power plants, it could be operated up to about 20 to 30 years. And if we provide more maintenance to the power plants, so it could be operated to up to 40 years. So actually, at the early stage, we invest a lot to build all of these coal-fired power plants. But for the renewable energy plant, well, even though it is zero like carbon emission, however, for the renewable energy, they may have some weakness. For example, the wind power and the solar power, we need all of these like natural resources to work. For example, if we don't have wind and we don't have sunlight, so we may still have to depend on the coal-fired power. So in the past, the coal-fired power has played a key role in providing the electricity and the power, but right now, all these coal-fired power have to support the development of the renewable energy transition. So in the past, for example, for one coal-fired power plant, it could operate 5,500 hours per year.
对电
But
力来说
now,
叫系统
as it has to
对
like
全
provide
社
some
会来说
support
叫转型
for the
我
renewable
这样什么
energy,
意思？实际
it
上
may come up with
不是
extra
说钱
cost.
从哪里来，谁
So
来
I'm
处理
not
而
talking
是
about
整
like
个
how we
社
get
会
the
转
money.
型的
I would say
它
this
要
is actually the
新能源
cost for
绿色
the
发展
overall
然后
transition,
总体
the
战争如果
transition
核算
to a
钱是没有用的
path of
它不是
green
说
development.
但如果不核算，那可能你过多的投入
But
也
still, we
对不
have
对
to do a lot
所以
of
核心是
calculation
解
to
决
strike
一
a
个
balance.
转型的整体成本问题。
So we
也就
still
是说
need to
您算
address
了一
to
笔
the
总账，就是
cost
说这
of
个
the transition of
整体
the
的成本，比如说
renewable
投入是
energy.
多少，这些转型成
So
本
you need
投
to
入是
do
多
a
少，你最后
calculation,
算
for
出来，
example, how you
最后
invest
你的收入
and
或者说
what
你的
is
收益
the
能够大于你的
return.
成本
对，
就总是会有人去投资的这个
In
整
the
体。
所以我
end,
刚才
if
一
the
讲到说，
return
有人算出来1
is
万亿，
going beyond
啊，
the
可能因为
investment,
它这个边界不一样，
finally
所以在
we
中
will
国
have some
有的算出
people
来
to
可能说
invest
碳中和
on the
需要
renewable
1万亿
energy.
人民币，
So
有
for
100万
example,
亿，
some
有的
people
可能是
may
500万
do a
亿，
calculation saying that it
因为
needs
它这个
about
边界条件也不一样，所以
like
你光是
100
讲
trillion
这个
yuan
实际
to
上我认为是
accomplish the
整
carbon
个
neutrality.
转型所带来的经济社会
But we need to consider
那
the
现在我
overall
们算过来这个
cost
账
and
怎么
also
算
the
出
profit
来
that we
的？所以我
gain
们
for
今
the
天在怎么
economic
考虑
development.
所以这也就是中国一个特色，就是我们
But
在
I
推进
believe
新
we
能源
already do the calculation
我们有
right. That's
5年
why
规划
China still
啊，这也
stick
是
to
中
the
国
path of the
可
green
能区别于
development.
其他国家制
And
定的一个
also
本质
China have a
我们这规
5-year
划是做
plan
规
to
划除了政策
conduct
的
this
引导
work.
整个方向以外，
So
它
of
就是
course,
包括
we need to have some
方面的
policy
平衡，
guidance, and
就是资
also
金
we need
实际上
to
是投入和产出。
seek a
另外，
balance.
我前面也讲到，就是说企业为
That
什么
is
要
what we call
绿色发展，
the
有法律
investment
法
and the
律的约束
return.
那么现在你想想，
So
法
for
律
the
法
green
规怎么出来
development,
的呢？
it has been
它肯
constrained
定不
by
是
the
说
laws
我
and the
只是一个颜
regulations.
色，它本身在制定法律法
So
规
for
的时候
all of these
就考虑
policies,
到技术。
it have to consider the cost of the technology, and also it have to consider the profitability.
它应该是满足绿色发展的要求。
So I believe all of these like policies
欲速则不达，
is
所以
moderate.
我们在
So this
2021年
could help
为
us
什
to
么
promote the
我们
green
提出来
development.
叫纠正运动式减碳。
So that's why we always are saying that
就是对我们
we
可能
need
有一
to
些
avoid
其他的
reduce the
不太正确的
carbon
做法
emission
一个纠
with
偏
a sweeping approach.
There are actually 2 points that both professors raised are very interesting. First of all, ESG investment or the investment into ESG is fundamentally for the safetiness of the investments itself. This is actually a very interesting point. And secondly, I was asking them where the money is going to be coming from if the investment amount is so big in order to facilitate a systematic transformation of this green energy development. And basically, they're telling me as long as the IRR can be justified, i.e. there are enough investment return, then the money will be definitely coming from somewhere, either from government or from private sector. I think that perfectly makes sense. Right, 你有什么要补充的吗？刚才的问题。
我想补充的
And
就
also
是
want to add some of my comments.
这个发展方向可持续发展的这个需求是
So we always have these like fundamental requirement to pursue the sustainable development.
整个人类都要
This will require that all the humanity should embark on the journey for this sustainable
不同的利益
development.
集团、不同的产业行业
For
它会
different
不断地
sectors or
去
different
相互地
industries,
调整。那么
they
最
still
终
need
呢
to
在
have some like
满足人
adjustments
们
or
对美好生活
coordination.
的要求
All in
这个
all,
是一
they
个
have to meet
各
people's need
个政府
and
都必
people's
须面对
aspiration
问
for
题
better
这个
life.
在这个前
And
提
this
下
is a common
它会
challenge.
还是会要推动这个绿色的转型，资金
But still, we have
配套
to
的政策，这些
boost
呢都
the
是
green transition.
一个
Of course,
所有的这些调
these
整
also have some
都是
relation with the
朝着这个
subsidies
向
and the fund.
同时进行，而且一定
We have to
达成这样的
make sure that all of these targets can be
说
met.
了很多这个我们的体制优势也好
You just
啊
talk
我们
about
自己
the
这个
institutional
企业
advantage
企业家的
for
优势
China
也
and
好
also for the
啊我们自己
advantage
制度
for
安排
the
的优势也好
enterprises in
等
China.
等总之我们是有很多
And
优势
all in
来
all,
做
we
这
have
个就是绿色
a lot of
转型
like strength
有什么是
to
我们不足
facilitate
的
on the
面
green
特别不好
transition.
的条件
So
的
any
原因
disadvantage
条
or
件在哪里
weakness in China, what
我
is
觉得我
some
们
of the
的
challenge for us?
困难难度呢，
I would
在于
say
这
as
个
for the challenges,
我们的这个多样性，我们不足，我们
we
的
are
这个
lacking of the diversity.
创新
we are lacking of the innovation because we are facing with the grave challenge. We need fundamental innovation. We need to use a brand new technical path or innovation to change where we are right now. All of these are weakness for us. So first, we need to achieve the carbon neutrality goal. For developed countries, I would say it takes them at least 30 years to, 60 years to accomplish the dual carbon goals. But for China, we only have 30 years to reach the carbon emission peak and also the carbon neutrality. So we have less time. This is quite challenging for us. And also for developed countries, when they're pursuing the low carbon development. Actually, they already reached the peak for the carbon emission in the 70s in the last century. They already start to use some of the renewable energy. And also for some of the carbon industry, they have shifted some of these industries in the developing countries. I would say they have a lighter task compared to us. And also, I would like to mention that China is still in the stage of the developing country, and we're about to build ourselves into a strong modern socialist country. But if we look at the overall cause, I would say we have less time for the modernization, because for them they take 100 years to realize the modernization. Because of the shortening of time, this will give us a lot of risks, and at the same time we also need to transform ourselves into a green transition. And that means that we need to be more realistic and also pragmatic in our transition. And also we need to come up with more technological innovation, because we are not able to deliver the dual carbon goals without technological innovation. But right now, with the existing capacity, we're not able to reach the goal, even though it is the same for all the countries. But for China, we are facing a more grave task. And in China, we are heavily depending on coal, even though we are developing the wind power and the PV power, but still we have a large proportion of coal that has been consumed every year. Because for the developed countries, they only have 35% of the energy are comprising of coal, but for China, I would say this figure is only 50%. And for the natural gas power generation in China, it only takes up about 2% of overall power generation. And if we don't have enough resources, we need to import the natural gas from other countries, and this is quite expensive. But by using the same energy to produce the power, this will also come up with a higher cost for China. All of these are challenges for all of us. I would say in the upcoming years, we have to address to all of these issues one by one. Well, this is what we need to do in the next decades to transform ourselves and to embark on the path of green and low carbon transformation. Even though we have a long journey ahead, but still we will get there in the end. And Professor Zhou, so we are talking about the biodiversity, and for common population, maybe they're not quite understand the concept of the biodiversity. Can you tell us more about the relations between the biodiversity and the green development? So first, I would like to talk about why we want to pursue the green development. This is because for the scientists and the politicians, we are already approaching to the 6th time of the distinction. This is rarely happened because last time we have this distinction can be dated back to 65 million years ago. And right now, the distinction, we are seeing that for some of the habitats are disappearing. So that's why we are having this challenge of the climate change. And also this will affect the public health for the general public. So actually, even though we see the temperature rise by 1.5 Celsius degree, this will have a dramatic impact to the ecology of the world. Actually, we are already approaching to this extinction. Because last time when we are having this conference, we are seeing that most of the targets we are not able to deliver. So that's why we have to change our way of living. We have to open a new chapter for the ecological civilization. So right now, we always talk about the dual carbon goals, and also we want to tackle the issue about the climate change. And also, we have to make sure that we have the sustainable habitat for human beings. Because right now, for the human beings, we are not able to find another habitat for us. So this is very important for us. When we're talking about the biodiversity, we are talking about the endangered species. In order to avoid the extinction of those endangered species, that's why we have to pay attention to this issue. And also one last question, it is also very important for us. So I believe two of you have been engaged in the green development in the past few decades. So my question is, do you have confidence for us to solve the current crisis? Well, we still are facing a lot of risks because for the evolution, while there were several types of extinction occurs, so I would say we still have a huge risk. But we have learned a lot of valuable experiences. For example, we see a lot of inventions, and we are trying our best to protect ourselves from the UV, etc. And right now, for some of the atmospheric crisis has been resolved by human beings. I believe by joining hands together, we still have a very bright prospect, but still we are still a little bit concerned about the future development. So when we are talking about the relations of human beings and the biodiversity, I would say they are interconnected. For man and nature, they are two important parts for the ecology. We always emphasize the harmonious coexistence of the human and the nature. So for biodiversity issue, it will not have an impact to the nature, but also have the same level of impact to the human beings. And also, you're asking whether I have confidence for the whole world to tackle the climate change. I would say for China, I have full confidence, but I'm a little bit concerned about the global prospect. So according to the Paris Agreement, it talks about we have to control the temperature rise to 2 Celsius degree or even 1.5 Celsius degree. But right now, according to the information available to us, we think we still face a lot of risk and challenges. And also, if we look at the INDC, submitted by the other countries, I would say I'm quite concerned about the climate change issue.
I asked to Professor a very important question as the final question of today's live panel is, are they confident in reaching the result of carbon neutrality of our whole human society? Basically, Professor Zhou was telling me that it's not that we didn't have our human society extinguished in our previous experience. So he's kind of worried, but he is also very optimistic that if we have a collective effort, then we might still be able to reach our goal. Professor Wang is basically saying that yes, there are a lot of challenges ahead, and he's very confident that China will keep its promise in reaching our carbon neutrality goal and try to go towards that direction at least. But other countries, there are challenges ahead. According to Paris Agreement, we are supposed to get 1.5 Celsius degree or 2 as a goal, but according to the current results and the reports, we're still having a very challenging reality facing in front of us. But anyway, green development is definitely a trend. This is not a choice, but a must-to-do for all human beings. So let's just marching towards that goal collectively and try to create a community with a shared interest for mankind. Thank you so much to professors. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. 谢谢。对，今天的这个还是。